Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lyle Allenstein.
And I'm Lexi Linderman.
Today, we'll be covering basically the only major topic going on right now regarding Penn State football, which is the move to hire defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. Last week, I sat here with Lyle and Avery. We talked about the vacancy at defensive coordinator. I think we kind of dismissed Knowles as an option at that point, and we were kind of eyeing Poindexter as a likely option, so you can go ahead and erase that one from your brains and pretend it didn't happen. Jim Knowles is officially Penn State's defensive coordinator moving forward with a record-setting $3.1 million annually over the next 3 seasons per reports. Guys, what do you make of the hire?
Yeah, I know you just talked about last week's episode. I think it's funny because we were talking about Poindexter, Danton Lynn, even the Browns safety coach, Ephraim Banda, just as guys that were like in contention. And, Jim Knowles, I think the episode came out on Thursday morning. I think it was like 10:30, 11. Football Scoop had that report. Well, Jim Knowles was floating around like the name all day pretty much right after, the episode came out, how his name was like he was getting in the mix. Penn State was reaching out to him, and I think 10:30, 11 o'clock Thursday night, Football Scoop dropped that report that Oklahoma and Penn State and Notre Dame were all in the mix for getting Jim Knowles, and it was reported $3.2 million. That was the deal that Penn State offered him. Oklahoma offered $3 million. I know Knowles was also asked I think before the national championship about Oklahoma coaching rumors, and obviously, he's not going to address them. And then Notre Dame, obviously, because, former Penn State tight end, Al Golden, DC just took the job for the Cincinnati Bengals. And, obviously this is a name that people were talking about to be in contention for once, obviously, Tom Allen went to Clemson. But the realistic chances of it happening felt slim because obviously Knowles it's Ohio State, national championship. He's led them to the best defense. And it's not a lateral move because Ohio State is obviously a tier above Penn State. You're taking a team that beats Penn State, obviously since 2016. But the reported rifts, between him, Day, the staff, Larry Johnson, obviously former Penn State defensive line coach who does the same at Ohio State, and how, I think he was, overstepping with the play calling. And then Knowles kind of, took over whatever during the playoffs, and they did better since he kind of did that. But then, obviously, Knowles wasn't really happy. He wasn't at the coaching, or he wasn't at the national celebration, for the national championship celebration. Obviously, a bunch of the coaches weren't there, I think, with recruiting things, but I think it was Brett McMurphy of Action Network who reported that he was, asked not to show up or whatever. And he didn't even get to tell the players or anything, even though he asked if he could go talk to the players, whatever, not be there. But they were no. I mean, I think you got a national championship out of Knowles, but I think this hire, Ohio State would have liked to kept it around. But I think this is a big time move for Penn State.
Yeah. I remember when Joel and I talked 2 weeks ago after Tom Allen just been fired. We talked about Jim Knowles, and I was just there's just no way that he leaves, and here we are. And it just kind of blew my mind. I think that, obviously when you hear about the rifts and everything, it kind of makes a little more sense. He's obviously from Philly. He talked to the team. Penn State football posted a video, and he was like, "This is where I want to be." I grew up watching Penn State football. You grow up in Philly, and you're consuming Penn State football. This is where you want to be. And I think it just speaks volumes here that he actually wanted to be at Penn State. It's not all about the money, because obviously they're making him the highest paid coordinator in college football, and he would be the third highest paid in the NFL with that $3.1 million annual salary, which is just insane. So, but I think it also speaks volumes about, the resources that Penn State is putting into this football program. I mean, we kind of saw it with Drew, Nick, Katron, Denai, Zane Durant, all of them, Zaki, all coming back. They clearly have the money to keep talent in, not let them, go to the league early. And I think, you hire a big-time coordinator with that money. You get him from pretty much your arch rival who, you just cannot beat. And now you have that on your team. You have, you're trying to, they clearly are trying to go for a national championship in 2025. And I think now with this hire, I think it's safe to say, it's reached a point where it could be natty or bust for them. I mean, you have Andy Konicki and Jim Knowles. That's I would say that's easily the best offensive, defensive coordinator duo in college football. And you got all this talent coming back. I just think it's just a huge hire for James Franklin, probably the best of his career, and just something I don't think most people saw coming.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction, because this was a name that got thrown out as soon as Tom Allen left, but I thought it was kind of a lazy take to be he's the best defensive coordinator in college football. He's from Philly, and everyone was like, I was like, there are so many more factors that go into it, and like it just felt so unrealistic that he would go from Ohio State to Penn State. But I mean, Lyle, like you mentioned, like the beef with Larry Johnson. Maybe, I mean, obviously it's all reported at this point, and like even if we ask, we probably won't get any real answers about like what was going on there behind the scenes between them. And it's not unusual for coordinators to kind of clash like that, especially when Johnson was like reportedly overstepping and kind of getting involved with play calling and things like that. And I also thought it was funny because I was looking at Larry Johnson's bio on Ohio State's website, and the first line is the best defensive line coach in college football is just in his bio, which I thought was kind of funny, but clearly Knowles didn't think so. And obviously there was beef there. And then there was like this leaked message from Jim Knowles' fiance, supposedly, and like can't confirm whether or not it was real, but it seemed real to me. Like I went on Facebook and like looked at her profile, and like it matched up with like, the profile picture and everything like that from the
good social media sleuthing,
the supposed from like the supposed message from her. And it was basically claiming that like Ohio State would not let Knowles attend the celebration after the national championship unless he agreed to sign like an extension with them, and they were willing to go up to $2.75 million is the number that was in that text message, or Facebook message, which obviously is like less than what Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma were all offering. But at the same time, it's like the reigning national championship, so they kind of have some leeway there, like some leverage. And obviously the other schools would have to pay a buyout since he recently signed an extension. But I thought that was interesting. His fiance also, like in the message, wrote like they locked his like swipe access to the building at midnight, like the night before the championship. So like he wasn't able to get in, things like that. And like apparently like Knowles wanted to be there, again, according to this message, which may or may not be real, but like to me it seems pretty legit, pretty real. And like according to the message, like he asked if he could go. He wanted to be there. He even said like he wouldn't make a speech, like he wouldn't talk. He would just shake hands, smile, and then leave when it was done. And they told him, no, like you're not allowed to show up unless you like sign like pen to paper with us for this extension, which I thought was a pretty bad look from Ohio State. And I tweeted as much, and Ohio State fans found that tweet and got mad about it. But I thought that was kind of an interesting wrinkle, just kind of the beef there. Maybe Larry Johnson's just it was all a long con to get Penn State back in title contention. Maybe he just wanted to see his alma mater succeed, so he was trying to drive Knowles out and get him back to Penn State. And I mean, Lexi, like you mentioned, coming back as a guy who grew up in Philly, and if you're, that's Penn State is the major school in the region. If you're from that area, and as Knowles said in his introductory speech in a little clip that Penn State posted, he said he's actually from Philly. He's not from outside Philly, which half the students here, basically anyone from the eastern half of Pennsylvania and anyone from New Jersey claims to be from outside Philly. But he's actually from Philly. But yeah, I mean, he's back. It's obviously a bold move. And Lexi, I kind of want to hit more on what you said about like what this indicates for Penn State as a whole to be able to win this bidding war, because you can look at situations in the past where Penn State got outbid for, whether it's coaches or players. I think more often than not it's players. And even if it's not directly like, offering someone a certain amount of NIL, like James Franklin has referenced in the past, Penn State like missed out on a 5-star recruit. He never told us who it was, but he said Penn State missed out on a 5-star recruit because the football dorms were like 2 people to a room instead of like single dorms, and the recruit like would not go for that, and they like lost a commitment because of that. And I think there was like rumors about it being Justin Fields, but he said it was a 5-star and never ended up like admitting who the player was. But like there are other examples you can look at historically where Penn State, like just because the funding and the facilities were not there, like missed out. And I think, like you said, this signifies like a change in that regard. Yeah,
I think you got to take a look at what Pat Kraft has done. It's been 2 years, right?
Yeah.
In his time as athletic director. First, you go get Andy Kolnicki, who reported, I think it was Audrey Snyder to The Athletic. His contract started at $1.6 million,
which now looks like a bargain.
Yeah, right. Because it's like, I forget if his deal was 3 or 4 years, but I think this year he's supposed to make $1.7 million. It doesn't matter what the number is going to be next year because he's going to be a head coach. But you look at what he's done there, and then you get Knowles, and obviously you just made the point. You make the argument they're the best coordinator duo in the country, and think that they are. Obviously, we'll see what the rest of this coaching cycle and things happen for next season. But it speaks volumes. And then because Pat Kraft has gone all in. I mean, James Franklin, we hear it every time he mentions Pat Kraft. Former linebacker in the Big Ten, treats his job as such. And, I mean, obviously, you could talk about all the other athletics as well, the investment, whatever he's done there, but just to keep it strictly on football. Keeping the staff as well. Like, we talk about how great all these position coaches are. Jaywan Sider, Terry Smith, and then like Anthony Poindexter. We talked about him last week, how he's a legit candidate, deserving candidate for this defensive coordinator job. It was reported by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports that Poindexter played a key role in getting Knowles on board. I guess the report said that Franklin told Poindexter that Knowles is a legitimate option. Like, Poindexter was like all ready for it. He was all on board. He's like, let's go get him. Like, the guy's legit. And I mean, like, rightfully so. Poindexter apparently called Knowles a few times, talked to him the whole process, played a key role in getting him here. And I think we talk about how the buy-in investment, but when it starts with the coaching staff and you're willing to do something like that, like, because Poindexter, whatever, he can go be a DC. We talk about how that Virginia job is literally his as soon as it opens up. But the level of buy-in that Pat Kraft is getting, and when you look at what the money, obviously we talk about how Penn State's been behind in NIL funds, but this whole like new revenue sharing thing with players obviously kind of changed the game regardless of NIL. But you look at what Sandy Barber did before Pat Kraft got here, it's just
Which is not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's like the alignment right now between Pat Kraft, Neely Bendapudi, and James Franklin, it's all clicking. And I think that this administration, aside, I think when you look at next year's team, when all these Drew and Nick Singleton, all these guys gone, I think it's going to be a step in the road. But I think when you look 7-8 years from now, the success what Penn State has, regardless of national championship, but like the consistency of winning seasons with the new playoff era, because like obviously James, he wins every game. He showed that's not Ohio State and Michigan. But you look at this in the future, I think this is the offseason you look at and be like, this is where Penn State turned a corner.
Yeah, I definitely think it's just, and I also just think it just resets the entire college football coordinator market. I mean, you're out here paying $3.1 million for your defensive coordinator. Like, that's absurd. And, like, obviously, like, I think it's, like, one of those things, like, like an NFL quarterback signs, like, the biggest deal in history. And then all of a sudden, like, mid-quarterbacks are, like, getting that same amount of money. Just because
was that a Daniel Jones shot?
Could have had Saquon Barkley.
All right, let's relax here.
Like, I think it's just one of those things that's just going to reset college football. And so I think Franklin and Penn State did it at a perfect time. Like, they have Knowles locked up for 3 years. And I think that's going to be big going forward. And I think if Penn State is where he wants to be, I don't see him leaving. I'm pretty sure he said in the past he has no really big desire to be a head coach. So it's like you lock that up for years to come. I mean, obviously he's probably going to demand a little more money if this like truly resetting the coordinator market. And then Kolonicki's going to leave, but to go be a head coach. But if they have the money to throw this much money at Jim Knowles, I'm assuming they'll keep doing the same for all their other coaching positions. And I think, like Lyle said, the fact that they're able to retain all of these coaches on staff is just like, it just speaks volumes just about like just how much money they actually, like, I feel like in the past, like we talked about over the like last off season about how like the NIL fund was just like non-existent. Like there was just no NIL money. And obviously paying the coach doesn't really come from NIL money, but I think just all of that has just taken like a step in the right direction. I don't think people have like are necessarily like noticing, but it's like we don't have like the actual numbers. Like we actually have no idea like how much money Penn State's bringing in any capacity. But I think just by all these moves, it's just like clear like going forward that they just and yes, so yeah, like Lyle said, I think the sustained success is like going to be built off of like clearly how much money they're investing into this program now.
Yeah. I think also like now with the benefit of hindsight, you can look back at the Tom Allen situation where, he gets hired away by Clemson and there's all this debate about like, what happened kind of going into that move. And obviously he got a pay raise going to Clemson with whatever, I think $1.9 million at Clemson and it was like $1.5 million at Penn State. I think it's safe to say Penn State didn't get outbid there given what they, just gave to Jim Knowles. I think it's more of, we'll pay you 1.5 if you want to stay, but if you want to leave to Clemson, like we don't think you're worth more than, what we're paying you right now. And like I think Penn State was more okay with letting him go, which, there was kind of some debate about that between like Clemson and Penn State fans on social media about like, there were Penn State fans trying to say like, I don't think Penn State fought too hard to keep Tom Allen in State College and things like that. There was like some discourse there, but I think with Ohio State, there's no doubt like they wanted to keep him right? Like they made him an offer for $2.75 million, which is obviously short of what the other schools were offering, but it still would have made him the highest paid coordinator in college football, even at $2.75 million. So they still made him a big offer. It was a pay raise on what he had been getting. And, you can look at the fans' reaction to it. They clearly wanted to keep him. Like, there's no one in Columbus who's saying, like, we'll be fine. Like, we'll find someone else. Like, everyone is mad. Like,
I mean, Ohio State, like, they've got several in-house guys that I think that they're just going to end up promoting.
Yeah. Well, they've got some options, but they're also in a tricky spot at this point in the cycle where it's like a lot of the top guys have already been taken. So at this point, you kind of have to go hire from within.
It's going to be Larry Johnson.
It might be. It might be. And, I mean, we were even saying, like, last week, we were saying the same thing about Penn State. We were like, it's so late in the cycle, you kind of just have to promote Poindexter because there's not a lot of people in the market. And then they go and get the best coordinator in college football.
Coaching staff said, watch the 1-0 pod and said, they watch this, right?
Oh, my God.
They kept the receipts. Clearly, we gave them the motivation they needed to go out and cash that check. I mean, I think Ohio State is kind of rattled by this, honestly, just given the reaction from that whole, community. And, I mean, they were going through the 5 stages of grief in my comment sections. Like, you had a large group of people who were just in denial. I mean, we saw guys who were commenting under every tweet saying, this is not real. This is fake news.
I'm like, this is a report, guys. Like,
right.
Under my article.
And, like, we made it very clear when we were reporting on it, like, this is per, this other reporter and, obviously could be, not true. But a lot of them were very adamant that this was not true and that Knowles would never make this move. A lot of them were still bringing up the, like, Penn State's record against Ohio State the last 10 years.
They're not used to losing.
There was there was a guy, like, in my comment section who was, like, coming after me personally and saying, like, this is normal in any line of work. Like, when you get offered more to leave for a job, like, of course they're going to take away his swipe access. And of course he's not going to be allowed at, like, the championship celebration. Like, he just left for like a rival job. And he was, like, complaining. He was like, clearly you've never worked, like, a real big boy job because this happens all the time. I was like, I didn't say anything. Like, I restrained this time. Usually I'm in those comments, like, battling back. This time I held back. I didn't say anything. But in my mind, I'm thinking, like, dude, like, you leaving, like, McDonald's for Burger King for, like, a $1 pay raise, like, is not the same thing here. Like, I think Knowles should have been allowed to celebrate the national championship that he led the team to with the number 1 defense in the country. Like, I think he should be allowed to be there, but
I want to go off that little fast food analogy right there.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Because when Tom Allen went to Clemson, there was the argument of if this was a lateral move or even a downgrade, or like even like obviously depending on the fan base of Clemson fans, you look at it, it's like, it's an upgrade because you make the argument that Clemson has had more recent success in the college football playoff era, and I think they have, but then Penn State fans were like, obviously with the future, like looking ahead based on last season, whatever, it's like, it's a downgrade. Like, we're more built for the future. You saw what we did last season. Dabo, doesn't use the portal, and then when he made those 2 portal moves, the whole like internet shook. So, but then there's like the argument to lateral, like based on the whole state, which I like. I listen to that argument. I do think it's a downgrade for Tom Allen based on even prior to this whole like Jim Knowles thing. But then you look at Jim Knowles coming in, and I think it's a downgrade. Like coming from Ohio State to Penn State, you can argue the argument for the future all you want. We've made the argument the past 2 years that Penn State has had arguably the better roster on paper than Ohio State. This year, I think no. Last year, I think you could have. But it's a downgrade. But I think, like, if Ohio State, like, regardless of, like, the friction, whatever that was reported, if you're trading a national championship for losing the best defensive coordinator in the country, I think you make that trade. Like, obviously, in an ideal world, you throw the money at him, he stays around. But, like, they probably knew it's a possibility that he's gone. And when you're looking at a job like Ohio State, obviously at this point, it's like, for the candidates, I think it's going to be an in-house promotion, but it's Ohio State. That's a blue blood. That is arguably top 2, 3, whatever college football program all time. It's not like they're going anywhere. You would need a Hall of Fame fall off and to keep Ryan Day around for such a long time, because I don't think Ryan Day's. I've talked about on the pod before. I don't think Ryan Day's a good coach. Obviously, he won the national championship, prove me wrong, whatever. But I saw people trying to make the point where it's like, this was the worst thing that Ohio State did for the future is winning a national championship because it means that Ryan Day earned his keep. I'm like, I don't really agree with that point, but whatever. But I think if you go back to like the impact of this, Ohio State is not really that affected in the long term. Like, this is a short term. oh yeah, whatever. When November 1st comes around, like we'll see because I guarantee you, if Ohio State wins that game, they're all going after Jim Knowles. Franklin is going to catch a lot of heat. Like I think more than a normal Ohio State loss because you made the splashy hire. You brought in their own guy. It's like I'm obviously this is ways away, but I'm really curious to see how this game goes November 1st, just because of the not necessarily the outcome, but like from the game perspective, just what kind of reaction national media gives to Knowles of Franklin.
I just think it's really funny. Well, obviously Ohio State's gonna be fine in the long run. Like this does not affect them really. I don't think. I mean, it affects them in like the very short term future, but I think they'll be fine. Like in general, they bring in talent every single year. Like I can't remember like in my lifetime, like at least as far as I can remember, like a team like an Ohio State team that was like not good. Like that doesn't happen. Like they're gonna be perfectly fine. I think that's interesting to me is just seeing how upset Ohio State fans are that Jim Knowles went to Penn State, because in my eyes, after every Ohio State Penn State game on Twitter, I see like Ohio State showing no respect to Penn State. Like we beat them 8 times in a row. Like
I mean, like I feel like rightfully so though.
Like yeah,
yeah, like
and,
they deserve
yeah, exactly.
Like talk your smack. You know?
Like yeah, and like they've beaten them 8 times in a row. Like they can talk that smack. So it's like, but it's like I feel like they don't respect Penn State until Jim Knowles goes to Penn State, and then they're like, why is he going to our arch rival? Like this is not like.
Meanwhile, when the Jim Knowles hire happened, Michigan fans come out of the woodworks.
That was yeah.
Like that was my most entertaining thought of the whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. You saw what we did, whatever 2023. We ran the ball all over. You see what we did against Ohio State this year. Jim Knowles has lost 4 times the last 4 years of the Michigan run game.
Well, this year I don't think was Jim Knowles' fault, and it.
No, they only allowed 13
Yeah.
points, and I think they had like 4 interceptions or whatever.
Yeah, this year was not Jim Knowles' fault, but I just thought, I just think it's funny because I feel like Ohio State, just sees Penn State as like little bro, and then it's like Penn
kind of
State's
like me and Joel. Like Joel's
Okay.
my little bro.
and then and then Penn State is like took their defensive coordinator, like made him the highest paid coordinator in college football, and all of a sudden Ohio State is like kind of like shaking in their boots a little bit, and I'm just like, why? Like I just like why? Like chances are like Ohio State still wins on November 1st. Like, I just don't know.
Chances are Ohio State is a like national championship contender. Like
They are the favorite to
Yeah,
repeat.
so it's just like whatever.
But I don't know. The only thing to me is like before Knowles got there, their defense was not great. Like nationally, it ranked in like the 30s, 40s ish for a few years before he got there, and then in his second year, they were the number 2 defense. In his third year, they were the number 1 defense. So like it was a very quick turnaround for Knowles. But I think like before he got there were like times where the defense was weak, like relatively, obviously.
And that was another thing with this whole Twitter comment section madness. There was the Ohio State community was saying like, oh, it takes a few years for like his scheme to like really fit in. And like, which isn't true. You just drop the numbers right there. As soon as he gets there, it's a tremendous increase. And then they're also making the argument where it's like the caliber of athlete that he's working with. And I'm like, don't get me wrong. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, these are all NFL players. But Jim Knowles is coming to Penn State with Denai Dennis Sutton, Zakee Wheatley, Zane Durant. Like, I think the personnel that he was working with at Ohio State is better. Yes. I don't think it's that much of a difference. Like, I think he's coming in, working with what he's got. And then, but I think another interesting thing, because we talked about like the ramifications with the Poindexter hire, is Jim Knowles coached the linebackers at Ohio State. And when we got the press release, it said that he wasn't going to be doing that, as his title was just defensive coordinator. So we talked about the ramifications of if Poindexter gets the head coaching job, where does this leave Dan Connor? We talked about him getting a linebacker promotion. I think that's almost guaranteed at this point. And it reminds me when Yurcich got canned, like, because obviously he was quarterbacks coach also. Like Danny O'Brien, it was just a matter of time before we got that quarterbacks coach promotion, which Franklin didn't comment on for like the longest of time, and like still hasn't even really like made the move official when he made the switch from GA to quarterbacks coach. I think it really only was official when we actually got him for immediate availability, because you don't get grad assistants. So that's just where I leave with that. I think the personnel is just going to be similar for him, but like I think not having to deal with linebackers is fine. I think him being able to float around is good, because Dan Connor essentially coached the linebackers last year, with Tom Allen. Tom Allen, linebackers is his specialty, but I think Dan Connor is one of the brightest young minds in football. I think you can promote him like down the road to whatever. I think he's a linebackers guy. Obviously, you know, he's Penn State's all-time leading tackler, and he has a linebacker. But Dan Connor, if Jim Knowles sticks around and Dan Connor like continues to shine, I think Dan Connor's gone. Obviously, this is a really long futuristic like whole look at the whole thing, but I think Dan Connor, because Knowles isn't going to be coaching linebackers, I think Dan Connor's getting a linebacker coach promotion.
I kind of want to go back to the personnel aspect of it all. I think like you look at the NFL and you look at how many defensive players Penn State has sent to the NFL in recent years, and I think that like a hire like Jim Knowles really just like is going to start like fully taking advantage of the talent they bring in on defense every year. Because like obviously Manny Diaz did. I would say he had one of the best defenses in the country when he was at Penn State. But I think, you know, like you look at like what Tom Allen did this past year. I think Tom Allen had one of the most talented defenses in the country to work with, and I don't think he like brought out the best in them just based off of how they performed against Oregon, Bowling Green, like we kind of talked about 2 weeks ago. But I just don't think he brought out the best with the talent he had. Like you have the best defensive player arguably in college football in Abdul Carter, and like
people didn't realize that until like very late in the season. Yeah,
and it's like I just feel like the defense should have been a little bit better. Like I think the Oregon game is one they easily win with like Manny Diaz, and one they would easily win now with Jim Knowles. So I think that this is also the perfect time for them to bring in Jim Knowles because they're losing substantial talent on the defense. They're losing Abdul Carter. They're losing Jalen Reed. Like I feel like what.
I want to go back to your Manny Diaz point because I agree with you. I think, well, first of all, I think Knowles' scheme reminds me a lot more of what Diaz ran. But I think Tom Allen, I agree with they didn't bring him to their full potential. I think Tom Allen's defense was soft at times in terms of its coverage. Like the tackling issues, like they were not aggressive at all, which I think you compare that to what Manny Diaz brought on the players. And it's like Abdul, obviously a linebacker, looked more aggressive. You'd look at Curtis Jacobs, Adisa Isaac, like these guys are all getting to the quarterback, and he's bringing out their play style. But I really think Knowles, because obviously, you know, I just wrote the film review. You guys can go check that out. But it's like, this isn't so far off as to what Diaz ran, because Tom Allen with the 4-2-5, he had 3 safeties on the field with KJ prior to the injury. Obviously, Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley, and then obviously you messed around with the whole lion, which Knowles calls the bullet. But then it's like, I think they could just go back to being aggressive.
Well, yeah. I don't think the defense is going to be as talented this upcoming season as it was this past season. But I think bringing in Knowles and the better scheme compared to Allen's like makes up for that. Like,
yeah, I guess. Are you saying this from like a development perspective or actually like where they go on to be in the NFL? Or is this just like a Penn State's efficiency on defense? Because
Penn State's efficiency on defense.
Well, because like statistically it doesn't really matter. Because they're ranked in the top 5, whatever. They've been with Tom Allen, with Manny Diaz, with Brent Frye. So I don't really think – are you talking about like their ability to compete in big games?
Like I think Tom Allen's defense should have been better. Like I think that like it was like a schematic issue. Like some.
Yeah, he definitely just kind of sat back and like, you know, let them – like he wasn't very creative. It was just he just kind of let them go out there and do what they wanted. But like
what.
I think Knowles is just so much more creative, like almost in a Kotelnicki sense where like – he can maximize the talent a little bit more or even get guys to perform like above their talent level, whereas Tom Allen just kind of took a super talented defense and was like, you know, go play football. That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you drop a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. For more football content, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials. We'll see you guys next week.